Hey everyone, so we are here. It has finally started. This is the first episode of the Killer Comics show from Geeky Guy Comics. It's been a premise that I've been thinking about for probably a couple of months now, and I've been speaking to a few people just to see how you do this and everything, and I finally got given the push just to do the first live stream, and I thought, what better way to do it than just to set up where I always do my comic reviews, where I feel comfortable at, and just to talk about comics and what everything is about. So obviously a killer comic to me is basically you go out, you see a comic, you see what you want to buy, you're interested in it, it really strikes you. It might be hot of the month, it might be something that you've had your eye on for a while. Some people call it a grail. It might be something that you've had your eye on for a while and something that you really want to get into. It might be the comic that came out this week. And the premise of this show is to talk about what you guys think is a killer comic to you. As I mentioned, it could be a new comic, it could be a old comic, it could be a silver grail comic, whatever is a killer comic to you. The special guest that I have on my show is going to talk about that exact thing. And I think what better way to start off the show with one of probably the closest guys that I've talked to on the comic book community. It is the one and only, it's my main man, Comico, Deano.
Hey, hello.
How you doing, Dean?
I'm all right. How are you? How are all the comic book nerds?
Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome, mate. I'm happy to be here.
I think we're all well. I think there's a few in the chat. I think we're doing well. It's absolutely great having you on. Firstly, I just want to give a massive shout out to the people joining in the chat from across the pond, as Rod the Rican would say. We've got Perry Comics joining in. We've got Rod the Rican. We've got Tom,
right.
Evening, and we've got Hydra Collectibles. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Yeah, so Dean, if you just want to tell us a bit about yourself.
What do you want to know? There's so much to tell.
So how did you... So, Comico Deano, you do your bargain bin battles, you do your mystery boxes, you do your comic hauls and stuff like that. But how did you kind of get into it? And yeah, how did you kind of get into it and where you are now? And we're talking about killer comics. So
how did I get into comic book collecting, or how did I get into ending up on YouTube?
How did you get into comic book collecting and talking about comics on YouTube?
When I was younger, my dad used to go to the local shop and come back with a copy of like the Dandy or the Beano. And for our American friends watching, the Dandy and the Beano is a kind of like extremely English comic book, very cartoony. I think most kids grew up on it my age, and from there I progressed. When I got to a teenager, I progressed into kind of the Marvel and the DC stuff. You know, Batman, Spider-Man was a big thing for me when I was a kid. Strangely, Captain America too, and I think that probably had something to do with like the TV, the cartoons and stuff and everything. But then as I got a little bit older, I discovered, women and drinking. And I sold those comic books and spent some time in America, in Texas and New York. Yeah, then came back and started collecting all over again, really. And eventually just kind of like wanted to meet other people and kind of be part of a community of other nerds, and decided to, come on YouTube and just have fun.
Well, mate, I'm glad. Like we reached out and we started speaking to each other through Instagram, and then it kind of, I think we both had the same idea to get the comic book community in the UK big as it was, as big as it is in the United States. And I think we've both kind of hit the nail on the head. I think we both do the same things. We're both interested in comics and stuff like that. So the premise of this show and the reason why I'm doing it is I'd like to know what people, how they go out when they're going out shopping for comics. What do they see as a killer comic? Like, what do you look for when you go out and buy a comic? Like, is it the cover that attracts you? Is it the premise of the story that you've heard before? I mean, what is a killer comic to you? What it might be something different to someone else. You see what I mean? So I kind of I put the show together just thinking, right, a killer comic to me, I might have read the previous issues and think, right, this week the story's hitting absolutely amazing, I'm going to go and pick that up. Or for other instance, it might just be a story that's coming out. So what is a killer comic to you, mate?
It could mean several different things to me. It could mean a grail that I'm hunting down, a book that I've wanted for a long, long time. But usually, the one thing that it has in common is writing and artwork for me. I like good writing. I'm an aspiring writer myself. I have been since I was a kid.
Yeah,
And I love artwork just in general, like any art. So the two together for me is like a marriage of heaven. I mean, comic book is like the ultimate form for me because you have those two elements there. So if
yeah,
those two things, writing and artwork, are innovative and clever, and I like the stuff that kind of makes you think. Don't get me wrong, I like the action stuff as well. Just like when you watch a movie, sometimes you want
yeah,
the popcorn action flick, and then sometimes you want
yeah,
stuff that's going to make you, think a little bit. So that's what it is to me, really. I kind of look for, just talented people who are trying to do something different or be a bit, clever with the medium.
yeah. I mean, because I think there's a lot of. I mean, I never really read like indie comics as much as I am now, and I think in the forte of the fact that like indie comics are really coming to the forefront now. I think with the fact that like DC and Marvel, they took a couple of weeks off, and that really opened the doors for like the likes of Boom Studios, Image Comics, IDW. They've come on with some really, really strong stuff from this. Well, probably towards the end of last year, I really feel that indie comics have been pushed a lot more. I mean, me and you, we've I think Adam Wheeler from The Secret Protectors, he was on your channel a couple of weeks ago, and it was really interesting to see how he is a writer, he grew up art and drawing and everything like that, and he's now feels that the right time is there. He's pursued his career and he's done it, and he's now brought out an indie comic that's going to be, in my eyes, it's going to be something pretty special.
I think so.
I think it will be, and I mean, I think I'm like the Kickstarter and everything he's done. It's really taken off. He's done really, really well, which kind of leads on to the next part of my question: is that every week, everyone among the comic community knows that on a Wednesday it's New Comic Book Day, but not all of us can get out on a Wednesday to buy the comic book. So, leading straight on to this, what was your killer comic of this week?
Well, I'll be honest with you, mate. I don't have a killer comic. I thought this show was called Killer Cooking, so all I've prepared is a cheesecake.
We can talk about killer cheesecakes. I love a cheesecake, mate. So why not? I'm just gonna have to do a bit of rebranding though.
What I've picked is I've gone for something a little bit different this week. I think all the Marvel and the DC stuff, a lot of exciting stuff happening there currently at the moment. I suppose a lot of people are talking about the Batman, at the moment. Yeah. And I think I just kind of, sometimes you need a bit of a palate cleanser, Yeah. And I've been reading a lot of Marvel and DC. So this week, I had my eye on one thing, and that book was Bliss #1 from Image.
That looks wicked. I mean, I read it today, and I tell you what, I really enjoyed it. Like, I like the whole premise of it. I like the artwork, everything. And I just thought, like, again, it's indie comics. It's indie comics. Image. If I'm honest, it blew me away.
Yeah, it's from the same team that brought you Coyotes. If anybody isn't a reader of Image stuff, you'll be familiar with that. But it's Sean Lewis and Caitlin Yarsky, and the premise of this is what grabbed my attention. They were kind of selling it as a kind of half Breaking Bad, half American Gods type thing. But yeah. I'll be honest with you, after reading it, I didn't really get that vibe from it, to be honest. I thought it felt a little bit like that, but I kind of wouldn't go so far as to kind of label it like that. But the thing I like about this is the story plays on that kind of, ignorance is bliss, that saying. So they're trying to be clever and with the writing part there. But Caitlin Yarsky's artwork on this is just amazing.
See, that's what drew me in when I first see it, like, because I didn't really know, it wasn't on my pull list or anything, so I wasn't going hunting out looking to buy the Bliss. And then I was getting the rest of the comics, and I kind of see that, and I thought, you know what, that looks like something different. It's a number one. I'm up for reading. I'm up for trying something new. And they say never judge a book by its cover, but the artwork drew me in straight away. I've got to be honest, the colours on it, the line work, it really did draw me in, and I was intrigued to see if it followed through, and I was very, very impressed.
Yeah, and what I loved about it is in the book, you've got these whole kind of whole page panels, and they're kind of cityscapes, and to me it's a little bit Mignola-esque in parts. Yeah. I won't say that that's a fair comparison, but if you look at it, you'll kind of see what I mean, particularly the landscape cityscape stuff that Caitlin does. And as you said, that just draws you in. This kind of dark and icky city, almost a little bit Gotham-esque in a way. You know,
that's exactly what I was thinking. Like the way that the dark tones draw you into like the center of the image. It was very much like Batman of old. You know, like I think it's one of the images where Batman's standing on the top of a church, or he's on top of a gargoyle, and it's just like looking out, and it's all like dark tones and stuff. That was very much what I thought about this when I opened it up, and what I liked about it is that it jumped straight in. It literally just jumped straight in, and I was engaged from, I think it was the first line when he's talking about how his father said he was something like a shooting star, and not everything is expected to be great, and everything can be like a fleck in the moonlight or something like that. I can't remember it in that word, but
yeah, I will say I think that part of the draw for me of this, because before I actually bought it, I had a quick flick through just to see whether it was going to be my thing, and the writing, it just stood out. It's very poetical. I found the writing, you know, it's got a lyrical tone, the way that it's written, like you said there about that beginning panel. It's almost kind of dreamlike, you know, when you're looking at those first couple of pages, and then you get into the kind of grit and the darkness of this city, and you know the situation that this poor chap's in.
So you're very lucky. You just said there that you got to flick through your comic. My LCS, unfortunately, is still dealing with the pandemic and stuff. So even though I'm really friendly with the guy that owns the comic book shop, he's still like 2 people in at a time and only pick up what you want to need. So I literally had to judge this book by its cover and pick it up and just get it on a whim. That the fact that I didn't really know nothing about it. I'd read about it on like the previewsworld.com, where they bring out the pre-release and stuff like that, and I thought it looks okay, but it's nothing I'm not really into. And then pick it up, and I'll tell you what, I loved it. I really did love it. And you never guess who's just joined the chat. As we mentioned him earlier, it's only Adam Wheeler from Secret Protectors. We've got the grey man in, as always. Tom has joined us. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Adam, you haven't missed much, mate. This is the first show, so I got one of my close guys from the community that talk a bit about, and he gives me some advice on the live streams and stuff like that. So yeah, I thought what better way than to get Comico Deano on. And yes, Ad, you haven't missed much. We are talking about a comic from Image Comics called Bliss, and we're just going to go from there. We've got the guy, the Poptimist UK has joined in. He was up very early with me, Dean, for the SDC Pop Comic Con extravaganza. So we're all faulting a bit, but we are here now. We're going to talk about this fantastic comic. So, I mean, so when you go out looking for a comic, as I mentioned before, I mean, you said that the art and everything draws you in, but do you look from, are you open to like new artists? So like reading stuff from new artists, or do you have your favorite comic book artist and writer and stuff that you would preferably go to? I mean, because for me, I'd never read anything from this artist and this writer before. So for me, I was like, do you know what? I'm going to open my eyes. I'm going to go and have a look at it. And I'm so glad I did.
It's a bit of both for me. I've got my favorites. You know, I tend to kind of revisit some as well, you know, like a lot of I was a big fan of Michael Turner, and I'll happily kind of sit down and read anything Michael Turner has ever been involved with. But as I said earlier on, I'm a huge fan of any art As you probably see on my Instagram, I'm always giving amateur artists a shout out, on my stories and linking to them if they've not got a lot of followers. So yeah, I'm just a big appreciator of art. So even if somebody new comes along, I'm gonna want to have a look and check it out.
I mean, I'm very much the same. I mean, I think we're of the generation where, I think you mentioned where we grew up on like the Beano, the Dandy and stuff like that. I'm very much of the generation where in the UK, I don't think comic books are as perceived as big as they really should be. I mean, in the United States, it's a massive thing. It's like a lifestyle. So I think over here, if we can just keep doing what we're trying to do and give back to the community, I mean, it's a fantastic community to be part of. I mean, I've met some fantastic guys like yourself that we will literally just interact every day, just talk about comics or talk about art and stuff like that. And it's just, it always comes back to comic books. And I think for me, I mean, do you have a specific place where you get your comic books from? I mean, I live in Croydon. I've got one comic book shop, and I'm all about going for the standalone comic book shops. So I mean, there are times when I'll go to like Forbidden Planet and stuff like that. But my local comic book shop, A Place in Space, I feel like there's more of an interaction there. You're more of a friend to them instead of just going in, paying your money and getting your comic. I mean, you're probably the same as me. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I like to go into a comic book shop and spend, I don't know, hour, an hour and a half in there, just talking with them, looking at the comics and just being in that environment instead of just picking up my comic and going and then reading it when I get home.
Yeah, very much so. I do spend a lot of time in my house. I like to take my time, usually before the whole pandemic thing started. My LCS is right opposite where I work. So I would go and spend my I'd eat my lunch and then I'd go and have a walk around there and have a look at the books. But I would wash my hands. Obviously, I wouldn't be going handling books without washing my hands. But no, I would do that. But I'm not just exclusive to my LCS. I've got a few hunting spots around. I've got a few charity shops. I go thrifting through them, and I've got a few little hideaways that I may know where some books are at certain points. So yeah, I kind of I do all of that really, And if I can't do that, then I just steal them from people.
I think it was on one of your streams, haven't I? Where was it Tom from Retro Cave where he got some? Was it where he stole the comics from a charity shop?
Oh yeah, he was given a free one. Yeah. That's what he says anyway.
Does that count in the bargain bin battles? Because I might just have to jump on the bandwagon.
No, theft does not count in a game of bargain bin battles.
Okay, well, I'm from Croydon, so I might have to rethink my strategy, mate. So I mean, we've opened up with a comic and stuff like that. So did you think that the premise of the story is going to live up to the overall arc of the story? Do you think that the way that it's gone so far? I mean, I was very intrigued. Like, I thought it was quite a very good concept, the way that it kind of gives the brief backstory, and then before you know it, you've jumped straight in and you've gone from being in like this mystical, dream-like state into the future, and we're just met with, without giving away any spoilers, we're kind of met face on with a problem that probably one of the main characters is going to have to deal with pretty quickly.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to spoil this for people. And I will say, if people go out and they do read this, bear in mind it is an issue 1. And as with most issue 1s, it really just sets up the story. But the reason why I kind of wanted to pick this up was because I thought there might be something in it. And having read the kind of setup in issue 1, I still think there may be something in it. And I know I was watching earlier Tom talking on Not Quite Mint over on his channel. And I know, listening to what he was saying, me and him obviously have a bit of a difference of opinion on this. I don't think he enjoyed it as much as me, but he did say he will be picking up issue 2 to kind of see where this goes. And I think it is that intriguing. Once you go through it, you think, I want to know where this happens, where this goes from here and what happens next,
Yeah.
And that to me is good writing, man,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I kind of I like a decent story. I like the setup, and if the artwork's good as well, it just completes the whole thing for me. Like I'm engaged. I'm full on reading a comic, I get right involved in it. And this really did, I really enjoyed it. And I thought, when I first started, I was like, oh, is this just going to tail on? Like, there's some comics out there, and you end up reading it just to get to the end of the comic. And I found myself in parts in this, reading it and really like looking at the artwork. I think that's what it done really well. Going back to like the dark tones and stuff, I was reading the comic, but then I was also looking at how the artwork told the story as well.
Yeah, very much so. And that's why, you know, having read a few issues of Coyotes and stuff, I can't say I was hugely into that, but having had, you know, knowledge of her work before, that's the reason why I kind of wanted to pick this up. I mean, these cityscapes, I've just opened the book there so you can have a look.
Yeah.
These kind of like, you know, like whole page panel cityscapes, they are amazing. You know, the detail in there is just, it's incredible. And even the way she draws people has this, I don't know whether you found this, but it has a bit of a grotesque kind of, everybody looks a little bit grotesque in the book. You know, I'm not sure how well that's picking up on the camera there, but I quite like that. It kind of makes it all seem a little bit ugly in a very kind of beautiful way, if that makes sense.
Do you know what? Like, I'm a big fan of Jeff Lemire. So he, like, the way that he tells like the story through like the family and stuff like that. I kind of got a little bit of that, like the way that it was all about the family and how things can overcome. And it was just the artwork. Just I found myself looking at the artwork longer than I did reading the story. And there is a part in it where, if I can say it without giving away spoilers, God's Gangsters, where it's literally put on a plate. It's basically reminding me, take the blue pill or take the red pill. What one are you going to do? What decision are you going to make?
Yeah.
And I found that very, very engaging and quite, as you said, grotesque, but I couldn't help but look away. It's like a part of a movie where you look at it and you're like, I don't want to look. But I was like, I need to look at this.
Yeah, and very much so.
I mean, I just think. Go on, Dean. Sorry, mate. Go on.
I think that what the thing in this is, and I'm not going to make the comparison here, but you know, one of my favorite writers is Cormac McCarthy. Obviously, not of comic books, but of novels. And the reason why I like him is because he writes some really dark and bleak stories, and he always has this kind of small element of hope or a little light burning that seems to be the focus there. And this kind of has that a little bit. Everything is so dark and ugly, and the situation, the city, the areas that he finds himself in his life, and then there's this kind of small, again, without giving too much away there, you see the reason why it's happening. But there's a small element of hope and light in there as well. So that's why I'm interested to see where this goes. I wanted to pick it up because I knew that these guys were the ones that did the Coyote stuff, and I gotta say I wasn't disappointed by it. So that's why I actually went through and bought it as well, and I will be picking up, you know, issue 2 as well. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, I honestly thought it was a kind of a cross. I did think it was a cross between like Breaking Bad and Ozark, the kind of way that it's kind of good versus evil, and do you make them decisions for the good reasons, or are you making them decisions based on the fact that you have to make them, but you don't want to make them? Do you know what I mean? And as you mentioned, if there is always that little glimmer of hope, that little shining light that you think, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And it kind of it always seemed slightly out of reach. Every page, it just seemed like it was just getting further and further away from. It's so hard to say without giving something away, isn't it? So,
yeah, it is.
But no, I thought it was a great comic. I mean, like, for people wanting to read this comic, I would definitely say that just go in. Like, if you do pick up a book and judge it by its cover, I would say this is probably one of the times that I've done it, and it's paid off for me, because everything about it, for me, I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, I didn't read it until this afternoon after I found out you was reading it, and I definitely think this is a comic that's going to stick around. I think it's a maxi series, so I think there's probably about 7 or 8 issues in it.
It is. I think they said it's a maxi series, and it's going to have 2 arcs as well.
Okay. But I mean, it's because most of these indie comics, you do pick them up. I think that's the thing I find, and I think that's the thing that's been changing lately with indie comics is that in the past, indie comics have kind of been hit or miss. You either pick it up and love it and want to continue the story on, or you pick it up, you read it, and you think, I'm going to wait for the trade paperback to come out. But this comic is definitely one that I'm going to be getting every time it comes out. I just found that even at the end, I was like, I really want to know. I really want to know what happens, and I think the engagement from the start of the comic all the way to the end, it was consistent. And I think the way that the writers have done that, I was really really impressed with.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm a huge advocate for indie comics because I think right now, and don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing on Marvel or DC,
Yeah,
but indie comics seem to be the most innovative, you know, with their ideas, with their
yeah,
diversity, with their direction. And I don't know whether that's because they know that they've got to go that extra mile to kind of compete with Marvel or
yeah,
DC, but you know, the innovation and is definitely kind of at the moment, I think it's coming from the indie writers and the indie artists. You know, it's mainly coming from Marvel or DC right now, in my opinion.
yeah. And I think that's a credit to the indie writers because obviously the power players like DC and Marvel, you would think they would be at the forefront of leading everything, but it's totally flipped on its head. I
Mm.
mean, if Image Comics keep putting consistently stuff out like this. I mean, for a first issue, I was blown away with this. I thought this is definitely something I'm going to add to my pull list because I just thought this wouldn't be out of place in like one of the power players with DC or Marvel. But the way that they wrote it, it stands out enough that you think that's found its place in the indie market. That's where it should stay. Do you see where I'm trying to come from with that?
Yeah, I do. I think that these stories, and particularly Image, this is, you know, in my opinion, why Image are so successful at what they do. Not only is it because they've got, you know, Todd the God behind them, but
Yeah,
you know, they are all the time. It seems to me like they're looking for new stories to tell, and I slightly disagree with you a little bit. I don't think that some of these stories that Image tell could be told by Marvel or DC. They're almost outside of that. You know,
yeah,
with these stories, there is no established universe
mhm,
in most of them, so
yeah,
therefore there are no rules for them to break.
yeah,
So you know, it's completely free thinking that they can just
yeah,
lay down in some of these things. And you are right, some of them you kind of do say, let's wait for the trade, and I do that on some of them too. But then
yeah,
other ones, I think, you know, I really want to pick those up. And I'll be honest with you, you know, some of my favorite reads have been from indie books, and that is just because they push that innovative talent of writing, of artwork, and that diversity. You know, I'm a
yeah,
big advocate for more diversity in comic books, and you know, that's why I've got a lot of respect for Adam in the chat here. You know, doing his book, The Secret Protectors. You know, the
mm,
diversity and the cleverness and things like that. That's what you got to look for in a book. You know, I
yeah.
mean, that's what
And
I enjoy. That is what a killer comic is to me.
mate, that's quality. And I'm just reading one of the like the comments from Adam, and he's put, I feel like Marvel DC less so has become such a bloated beast. It's almost consuming itself at this point, and I think he's so right about that. I mean, obviously Adam is an independent writer, so he's at the forefront of basically what we're talking about now, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if more mainstream artists that work for DC and Marvel and make come over to independent comics. I mean, that comic Bliss, I wouldn't be surprised if the likes of like Mirko and Dolfo was to do a cover for that. I
Mm.
mean, because if you think about it, like her artwork, I mean, she's done a comic at the moment called Mercy, but it's amazing. It really is a good comic, but there's quite similarities in between in what she's done with that and into this. Like it's kind of like the mystic arts and stuff like that, and like the artwork and everything. And it's just really engaging. I mean, I'm really really enjoying the independent comics now. And Bliss #1. If you hadn't have told me you was reading it, I don't think I would have picked it up. And I'm so
Mm.
glad that you telling me you picked it up as your killer comic of the week. This is what I'm trying to get over. Like if someone is into a comic and they don't know, I want people to come on this show, they want to see what we're talking about and they want to find out what a killer comic is to us, and we can give enough information to them for them to think, right, do you know what, I wouldn't have got into that. If it's a killer comic to the likes of me or you, they might give it a read, they might pick it up and think, do you know what, it was great. And I think if you are looking to pick up an independent comic at this moment, Bliss is at the forefront of that.
I think so. If you're looking at if you want to jump on a new indie title, if you're thinking, hey, do you know what, like me, you're at that phase where you think, you know what, I just want a bit of a palate cleanser, you know, something a bit different that isn't, you know, Marvel, DC kind of driven in that way. This is perfect. And just to looking in the chat here, just to address Bob's Comics and Hydra there, I completely agree with them. You know, they've said, you know, I think it's hard to consider Image, Boom, Dark Horse, etc. as indie publishers. I completely agree, but I'm using that term to just kind of describe anybody outside of Marvel and DC. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Image really is the kind of third big publisher, isn't it? You know, it's not really an independent anymore. But yeah, that term, you know, we all use that term indie to kind of refer to anybody outside of Marvel or DC. And if that's kind of what you're looking for, I think that's perfect for you right now, in my opinion.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of, like, I've just got a few notes that I made actually on the comic, and it's like, in regards to, do you think the way that the plot was set up was engaging enough to grab you straight away, or do you think over time the plot's going to engage? I mean, for me, it's definitely a comic that you would have to pick up at #1. You wouldn't be able to jump on it at #2 and think, right, I can get the premise of that, I can read the prelude or the premise of #1 and just jump straight into #2. I personally think you have to read #1 to understand where it's coming from.
Oh, in that case, you know, don't read it. Don't bother. Yeah. No, I'm only messing. It has said that it's 2 story arcs. So I guess if you kind of miss the first story arc, you might be able to jump on for the second one. But you know, I don't know what that's going to look like right now. But they did say it's a maxi series with a 2 story arc sort of run through. So maybe if you miss that first one, you can maybe get in on the second one. But again, who knows where this goes? I don't know. But as I mentioned, I'm intrigued, and I'll be sticking with that, because this to me is you know, you've had like the Walking Dead finish and things like that. There's been quite a lot of independent stuff finishing, but there's been some great stuff starting as well, and I'm putting that on my my greatest start. That's a great #1 for me from Image.
And I thought the way that it built the characters up. I mean, at the moment we know there's 2 main characters that we've been introduced to straight away, but I think the third, I'm just going to say, I think the female character in it, I think she could have quite a big part to play. And I think even though the 3 main characters in it are from a family, I think it's going to open up, and I think it's quite easy to see how this can open up to like two arcs, because of the 2 different worlds that we're seeing from the beginning is very, very interesting. I mean, there's one in it where, I don't know, it's like the Court of Owls, for instance, where he's introduced to this place and he doesn't know which way he's going to go. And I think that is, even though it's a first issue, that's opening up as a second arc to think, right, that's one story there, and this is one story that we're reading here.
Yeah. The thing with this as well is it's unclear from issue 1. I mean, because I can almost see this going quite dark and violent as well. You know, because of where he ends up in the end and what he's potentially going to be doing in issue 2 and onward. This could go to this could be a really dark book.
I'm hoping it is. The sadistic part of me is really hoping it is. I mean, I've been reading like the DC Black Labels, so like the Hill House stuff, so I've only really started to get into like the horror genre and stuff like that. But this genre of comic is kind of becoming my favorite stuff to read. I mean, we have the stuff out there like the Batmans and the superheroes and stuff like that, but I'm really enjoying this more. I find it more intriguing. I'm finding it a better read, and I think overall, the likes of IDW and Boom Studios, I'm enjoying their comics a lot more. And Image, for me, over the last couple of months, I've really enjoyed sitting down and reading them instead of just thinking of them as a second fiddle. You know, like, I've done my Marvel, I've done my DC, I'm now going to read an indie comic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think there's still quite a lot of people out there, you know, that see them kind of third in line to everything else. And
Yeah.
that's not my case. That's not my experience with it. I think, like I said, I found some great stories in there. Another example is the Ice Cream Man as well. That is
Yeah.
one of my favorite comics of the moment.
See,
Did that
you mentioned
independent kind of horror anthology is again so innovative.
yeah.
It's unbelievable.
So yeah, maybe I should have called this show something else, because like maybe should have called it indie comic of the week, because I think they're going to just absolutely smash it this year. If I'm honest, I might just literally delete this and call it the indie killer comic of the year, because
I told you, mate, you should have gone with Killer Cooking.
Killer Cooking. I should have done Killer Cooking. Yeah, Death by Cheesecake. So I mean, overall, this story, I found it engaging. I found it a very, very good read. But would you say, what are the pros and cons of this killer comic for you, like of what you picked up?
Well, we touched on quite a few of the pros there already. The pros, innovative writing,
Yeah,
sort of, if you kind of like your writing with a little bit of poetry, a little bit lyrical, that kind of a bit of a fantasy touch to it. That to me is a pro. And the artwork, as I've mentioned, couldn't praise it enough. I think the art on this is fantastic, and I think Katlin Yarsky is an artist to watch out for, in my opinion. And another pro is it left me wanting more, but I suppose that might be a con at the same time.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of like, oh, is that it? And that's how I knew I'd read a good issue, because by the time I got to the end, I was like, what? I want more of this, So I don't know whether that's a pro or a con. I suppose it could fit in either way, really. To me, it's a pro, because if you leave somebody wanting more, you've got a good story there, in my opinion. Trying to find something else that I didn't quite like about it, but I'll be honest with you, there wasn't that much I didn't like about it.
It wasn't.
It kind of irritated me we didn't get more kind of information about the current situation, about like you have a narrator in this and you kind of don't know, is he reliable, is he not, what's his deal? You don't find out anything about that, but I suppose they're going to go into that further down the line. So I wouldn't really say that was a con. That's just me wanting more again, I suppose.
I mean, I would say very much the same thing. I think at the start of the story, I kind of thought I'm really engaged, and it gives you the bit of the backstory, and then it kind of just transcended. And there was a part in it I was a bit confused. I was like, right, why has he done this? I think it's the part where he goes back to, he's got all the money and he hands it over. I was a bit confused about that. I was like, right, where are we now in this story? Where has he got that from? And then it kind of cut to a bit where, I mean, I think for me, the guy, he kind of came across as a bit of like a Keanu Reeves, John Wick type of thing. The way that he was like he ends up being like a man for hire. And that isn't a spoiler. That's just me trying to get over.
Spoiler.
Oh, no, it's not a spoiler. I'm trying to reel that back in, but it's not a spoiler. It's kind of like a spoiler, non-spoiler type of spoiler, if that works.
You keep digging. Oh, I've just activated you on look. Is that handsome man?
Who is that handsome man? Has he got the kid cooking?
I've just done it because you can't really see the chat on here, like, because I'm on my phone, so I've just put it on this, so I can kind of see what people are saying at the same time.
I mean, I've tried to Bub's Comics, the conglomerate universe that is Marvel and DC, each exist, and it's very hard to dismantle. No place for news stories and realities for those two. I think that's right, and I think, Dean, you literally smashed the ball out the park with that one. You said there's no continuation needed for an independent comic. There's no barriers for them to break down.
No, it's easier. It's, you can literally sit down and go, right, with a brand new story. You're not constrained by, like 50, 60, 70, 80 years of history with characters and storylines, so it's definitely easier to be more innovative like that. But, I'm not bashing on Marvel and DC because, I love all of that stuff too, but, Bob's is right there. But I think when DC and Marvel do get it right, that's what is so good, because you've got to be even more clever to have that innovativeness and tie in with all of that stuff that Bob's talking about there.
Yeah. I mean, I really want to talk about what bliss is, but is that going to give it away? I mean, I kind of think bliss for me, when I looked at it and it said bliss, I was like, oh, okay, so is it a happy place or is it something else? I think you'll agree with me on it.
It's about drugs, kids.
Don't do drugs.
Just say no unless it's bliss. Then say yes.
Just if it's $3.99, say yes. Say yes. But I mean, I really enjoyed it, and it's probably one of them comics I'm going to read over again, because I feel like even though I read it and enjoyed it, I'd want to read it again just to see if I missed anything, just see if there's any like twists and turns in there, because the artwork's so fantastic and it's like dark and gripping and really draws you in. I feel there's something there, especially on that. I think it's one of the opening pages where it's the first shot of the city. Yeah, I mean, look at that.
Not that one.
No. That's the opening one. I mean, that's got a touch of euphoric. I mean, is that bliss? Who knows? Is that what bliss looks like?
Yeah. I think sorry, mate. What?
I think it's the one you showed earlier where they first hit the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look at that. That's so engaging, and that really does have like the Gotham-esque.
Yeah, it's and even the feel of this, and then you get this huge double, where there's a whole court of people here, in attendance, and I don't know if you're going to be able to pick this up, but everyone looks slightly kind of ugly. It's got a kind of grotesque way about it, but in a way mixed with that kind of lyrical writing and that kind of fantasy writing. It's done in a really beautiful way. I know that doesn't make sense when you say it out loud, but if you read it, you'll know what I mean.
As we spoke about that, it's like the light shone. It just miraculously came on, and it just goes back to we've talked about. There's a little glimmer of light in every page, and I can talk as if by magic it just came on. No, it wasn't magic. It was thanks to my wife. She kind of got the signals as I was going, turn the light on, because you couldn't see me.
Seeing hand signs, turn the light on.
Well, it's Tom Harris. Don't do drugs, okay? The B cover made me assume it was a drug. So there is did you see the B cover of this?
No, I did not.
I'd be interested to find out who did that B cover, Bubs. If you do know, could you please drop it in a comment, because I'd love to have a look at that. Who did that B cover, really?
Let's have a look. Let us consult the machine of Google.
Well, I don't know. I'm just going to look through some of the. Does that, as it's a maxi series, does that mean it comes with wings?
I just got that. I was a bit slow on that. I was like, okay. Clever boy.
I mean, I'd be very interested to see what the B cover looks like. I mean, because the A cover was standout.
I can't seem to find it, mate. To be honest with you.
I can't find it either.
No, I can't see it. Next.
Cheers, Bubs. Oh, it's by the same artist, he said.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to research into this, and I'm gonna have to look.
Yeah, if it's the same artist, it's bound to be a good one. No doubt about that. As I said, I think she's definitely got a massive future ahead of her, in my opinion.
So, I mean, reading this, I haven't touched on Coyotes before. I mean, would you say if I'm liking this, to jump into that, would you say if someone was to come on and say Coyotes is a killer comic, is that the right term to use?
Is Bob's? Is that the one?
Apologies, I meant cover. Yeah, see that? Yeah, that's the cover for issue 2.
Oh, is it? I can't see a B cover on here. I've just got 1, 2, and 3. That's all I can see.
The Grey Man was pretty smart, and I've got to give him a shout out here. He said, if it's about drugs, maybe it's an E cover. Ba-dum-bum. So would you say that, because obviously I've read this and I really would like to read more from the same artist. So would you say Coyotes is similar, or is it a different setup to this one?
Yeah, you did ask me that. I wasn't paying attention. Sorry, mate. I was getting distracted by the grey man and his jokes. I've only touched on Coyotes. I can't say that I've read a lot of it. I kind of read the first few issues and stuff, and I thought it was good. But I think it wasn't enough to hold me at the time. I can't remember what stole me away from it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the two of them work well together again on it. You know, I wouldn't say it was a badly written book. It just didn't. I don't know. Just the story wasn't for me. You know, however, this time around, you know,
Yeah.
and that, like, again, this is why I picked it up, because I enjoyed what they did with Coyotes, but the premise of this sounded more interesting to me, if that makes sense.
That's a sign of a good writer. I mean, even if they've done a comic before and you haven't really enjoyed it, their name is stuck in your head and you thought, do you know what? I read something that I liked from them before, so I'm going to pick up this.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
I really enjoyed it. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this pans out. I'm liking the artwork of it. I mean, overall, out of 10, I'd probably give this a 7, I think, because for a first edition, it covers enough to grab your attention straight from the off. It continued to keep that consistency throughout, and the ending left me wanting more. And that's always a good sign. That is always a good sign of a killer comic. If it can start and end with the same energy, you're onto a winner.
yeah, I think, yeah, if we're gonna assign a kind of a number or rating to this, I think it'd be an 8 for me.
Yeah.
As far as, it's hard to you know, put a thing on it, because we don't know where it's going to go. I mean, issue 2 and 3 might be amazing and put it in a whole speculation group of, oh, it could be a great TV series. It could go that way. Or issue 2 and 3 might be absolutely trash and it might just kind of burn out. But as far as a single issue and a number 1 goes in setting up a story, I think it's an 8 for me. I think, you know, if I could write an issue 1 as well as this, I would be very happy with the work that I've done. I think that Sean Lewis and Caitlin Yarsky, they should be proud of that, I think, so far as a number 1.
The chat is just going off. The grey man seems to be on one. Unless it's Wile E. Coyote, I'm not interested. Okay. Bubs is like Acme Drug Co. So yeah, I think the premise of this comic, guys, is bliss is in the eyes of the beholder. That's how I'm going to leave it. That's how bliss is in the eyes of the beholder. But I mean, if you were to sell this comic to someone, Dean, what would you say, mate? I mean,
what would I say? I'd say give me a 5. It's yours. That's what I'd say if I was going to say it.
Where did you get that from? A 5? I only got mine for $3.99.
Yeah, I got mine for $3.99. You got to make a profit there, mate. Come on, these are hard times. We're in a recession.
Yeah. The economy's failing, so you got to go at least 450. 450.
No, I don't know what I would say to somebody if I was selling it to them. I would probably give it to them and say, "Hey, read this. It's cool." But no, I think that's it. I mean, if that hasn't at least, you know, piqued your interest a little bit to go and maybe give it a look if you're a fan of kind of image stuff. I don't think anything will, if I'm honest with you. I think, you know, go back to Batman.
I was literally just about to say that. If you want engaging artwork, as you touched on it, poetic writing in parts, engaging, consistently gripping, that I thought from start to finish, this is definitely a comic that I would say, if you haven't read an independent comic before and you're looking for something just to tip your fancy a little bit, this would be a perfect place to start. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I'm definitely going to stick around for number 2. I think the way that the character is portrayed throughout is it's harrowing in parts, but then it's quite endearing because you can see where he's coming from. You can see every angle that he's coming from. You can see the wider range of the story and how he's opening up to tell more of it. and there's some really touching parts in it. I think there's a moment that he has with his wife, and without going too much into it, you can really see that the pain is going to carry on with a sense of, what's the word, with the sense of endearment. I think it is that at the end of this, as it has been throughout the start of the comic, there seems to be a light at the end of the tunnel. But is that how it's going to pan out? I think because everyone expects a comic to be happily ever after, but there's a part of me that kind of is like, I really don't hope that happens.
I don't think it will, mate. I think when you, as I said, when you see that narrator talking at the beginning, it implies that the character that we're talking about, without giving any spoilers, you know, it does become a kind of scourge to humanity in some kind of sense. You know, they use the markers to kind of show you how bad what this person's done is, but we don't know what that is yet. That's what I said to you earlier. I think this could go to some really dark places, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of had like a John Constantine type of vibe to it.
Yeah, sort of. You know, but there is no kind of magic involved in it, and as far as we've seen in this, there's kind of no superpowers or anything like that. It strikes me more as I can get what you mean by the fantasy thing, but this reminds me more, you know, I suppose like Sandman, maybe, I don't know, in that kind of way. It's
I mean, there are definitely similarities in like in like the Sandman and stuff like that, which is why I think, because there's just certain aspects in it that, I mean, there's one scene where it's literally, you just don't know what's going to happen, and I was just like, this is very similar to a Constantine type of vibe where it's just him against the world. But then it confused me. I'm not going to lie, it did confuse me at the start because I didn't kind of know what was happening. The way that the comic opened with like the fall in, and it kind of looked mystical and stuff like that, I thought, are we going to get into something that's a bit fantasy, a bit out there, a bit like magical type? But as you go in, that's what kind of got me in it. I read that and I was like, oh, am I going to want to enjoy this? And then when I flicked through it, I was even more gripped, because I was like, you lured me in on the first page, you've totally flipped this on his head, and now I'm into something more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. And that is a sign of fantastic writing. If you can do that, if you can get the reader in on one premises, and then no, I wasn't reading it in like a bloody caravan site or something like that. I'm talking, if you can read it on one premise, and then with a turn of a page,
you should stick to what you said, mate. You know, read this on a caravan site, people. It is the best way to do it.
In the dark. But I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a gripping comic. I'm really glad that you told me you was reading it, because it opened my eyes and gave me the opportunity to read it and share my opinions with you. And I think overall the sign of a killer comic is, if it's gripping, it's engaging, and it grabs your attention and it keeps you wanting more. I think you might not agree with me. My idea of a killer comic might be something totally different to you, but in my eyes, a killer comic is what I've just said. If it's gripping, if it's engaging, if it grabs your attention and makes you wanting more, that's the sign of a killer comic.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree with that at all, mate. You know, that's what it's always been for me. It's about that innovativeness, the cleverness of writing, and you know, if they can do that and actually raise the bar to make some sort of impact and change. You know, there's a lot of books out there that have kind of done that in the world and in history. Then even more so, you know, that's what a killer comic is to me. It's not that, I mean, you know, who's the new first appearance this week, or, you know, because none of that really applies to my kind of collecting. You know, don't get me wrong, I will pick some of those things up here and there, but I don't really speculate on comic books, you know, to buy and sell. So it's not really the first thing that I look for in a book.
Yeah. I mean, and one thing, I mean, if this was to be a 12-part issue, does it become a serial killer comic? Ah. Oh, he's gone.
I'm back. I'm joking.
I knew that was going to kind of kill it, which is ironic considering it's called the Killer Comic Show. So it was dying a slow death there. But I mean, Dean, thank you so much. This was the inception of the show. I spoke about it with you. You kind of helped me along the way on that. You gave me like the advice and stuff like that. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time for sharing what your killer comic is with everyone. Thanks to everyone that's joined on the chat. I mean, we've had people from over in the States, we've had people in the UK. I mean, thanks very much. And Dean, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, mate. I'm sure we're gonna talk again. And if there is anyone out there that is looking for an indie comic, I would jump into this feet first and just enjoy it as much as myself and Dean have. I mean, the Grey Man, what is the opposite of a killer comic? I don't really know. Let's go with killer cooking. Killer cooking. Yeah, I'm going to start up another YouTube channel. It's called Geeky Guy Cooks, and we're going to be talking about cheesecake next week. So yeah, the opposite of a killer comic is a killer cheesecake. Grey Man, you can be the first for that when I buy one of your grey boxes. But you can jump in on that. But yeah, I mean, Dean, thank you so much. I mean, this is the first show. Hopefully it's the first show of many. Hopefully you guys loved it enough to stick around. I did waffle on a bit, but I will learn and I will get better. And Dean, I've just got to say thank you so much for wearing your flat cap.
Just for you, buddy. Just for you. I know you're a fan. A lot of people are, because I haven't worn it in the last few videos, and people are like, "Where's your hat go?" I'm like, "Okay,
I mean,
I'm gonna put it back on."
I spoke to you last night and I was like, where's your flat cap? That was the first thing. Where's your flat cap?
Yep. People have been missing the hat. So just for you fans of the hat, it's back.
I think it's great that people know when you ain't got a flat cap, they're like, well, where's Deano? Comico Deano, where's the flat cap?
I'm like Clark Kent, with his glasses, put the hat on.
You are. You had it. You didn't have it on yesterday, and I didn't know who it was. I didn't know who I was talking to. But I really didn't. It really blew me away. But Dean, as I mentioned, mate, it's been great. Thank you for helping me along the way. And you were one of the first people I spoke to about doing this show, and you've kind of had my back. So thank you so much, mate. You've given me advice, and I'm definitely going to waffling on as the serial killer. That's what Bob said. And I am waffling on, mate, because I'm excited. I'm like a little kid at Christmas. I've got a new show. It's like a new toy. And I've got one of my close friends from the comic book community on here with me. So I am waffling on. And on that note, I'm going to stop because I don't want to become a serial killer in the first inception of the show. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Dean, thank you for taking an hour out to spend time with me and discuss Bliss
you're more than welcome, mate. Anytime.
Absolutely fantastic. And hopefully we will have more killer comics in the future, and you can be, hopefully you will join us next week in the chat, and you can see how bad I actually waffle on. Love you, mate. Dean, it's been absolutely fantastic. Tom, Dean does have hair under that hat. He did have a COVID haircut, but he looks good without the hat, and he looks good with the hat. So who knows? It might be a way forward. Does he come without it? Does he come with it? Who knows? But Dean, it's been emotional, mate. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who's joined me, and I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Cheers, bye. Right, so if I end